So hey, good morning guys. Thanks a lot for joining our track, manufacturing track. We want to talk about the next generation of manufacturing, what's happening in manufacturing. The last couple of years with COVID, we have seen a lot of challenges, both in supply chain and of course in the limitations in manufacturing. With that, right, let me invite Anand Kamannavar. Anand Kamannavar is the global head of Applied Ventures, the venture arm of Applied Materials. He manages a $1 billion fund with over 90 plus portfolio companies, over 18 plus countries. Anand has been over a couple decades in the venture capital world, and with an amazing track record in both himself being a technologist and now getting into various elements of technology deep tech. Let's directly hear from him, from his words. With that, let me welcome Anand. Anand, where are you? There you go. Awesome.
Well, good morning, TiEcon. First of all, it's great to be back here post-COVID in person. This TiEcon is very close to my heart. And the whole TiEcon, the whole event wouldn't be possible with organizers, sponsors, but more importantly, key leaders like Anil and others who make it happen. A big round of applause for the TiEcon volunteers and members. Today I'm going to talk about RRR. Anybody seen the movie yet? Okay, good. So I'm going to talk about reinvesting the remarkable return of manufacturing. At TiEcon, over the last couple of years, you would have probably heard of 50,000 talks about ChatGPT this, ChatGPT that, AI, ML, and so on. It's almost like a big, you see these big movies that are overhyped, over-budgeted, but at the end of the day, it is movies like RRR that take the Oscars, and manufacturing is exactly like that. In Silicon Valley, we don't pay attention to manufacturing. It is like, we're enamored by two folks in a garage and a dog creating software like Google and Facebook, which change the world, which is extremely important. But if you see underlying the US economy, we'll start with the US economy first, right? Is while manufacturing accounts for only 11% of the GDP, it accounts for 60% of our exports, right? If people talk about our fiscal deficit or the gap between exports and imports, it is manufacturing that's actually holding our economy together. And if we do get our manufacturing story right, and then US gets its manufacturing story right, we have the ability to create nearly $500 billion of additional GDP. That's $500 billion. That's $500 billion, and create 1.5 million jobs, right? I can't think of a better win-win situation than this. If I were a politician running on elections, this is what I would focus on. Today, manufacturing is a very big topic, so I'm going to focus on 3 sectors and 2 regions for the discussion today. The 3 sectors that we are investing quite a bit of is in the electronics, which is the broader semiconductor industry, the batteries, and the biopharma. So what are the big tailwinds driving these 3 industries? On the electronics side, as you can see, there's a significant amount of increasing semiconductor content. There's a whole discussion around the digital transformation. No CIO board discussion goes without the discussion around digital transformation. On the EV side, how many of you guys drive an EV car, a Tesla or an EV car here? Okay. In Silicon Valley, I can't think of like one traffic light that where I haven't seen a Tesla or an electric car pull along with us. But globally, electric cars are still a very small percentage of the world economy, but I'll show you why that's going to change. And lastly, on the pandemics, how many of us have been affected by the pandemic, right? Whether it's in here or in India or anywhere in the world. Anybody got affected? Family members got affected? Did we worry about vaccines being not on time, or medicines not being on time, or oxygen not being on time? Yes. And fundamentally, it came down to manufacturing. So what's driving the semiconductor industry? For the last 70 years, it took us 70 years to get us to $500 billion, that's 500 billion of semiconductor annual consumption. 70 years. Our belief is in the next 7 years, we're going to add an additional $500 billion of semiconductor content or semiconductor usage across the globe. 70:7, that's 10:1. So the semiconductor industry will be an annual $1 trillion industry across the globe. And why is that? So I need to be buzzword compliant, but let's start there, right? Everybody talks about this large language models and AI this, AI that, but underlying that, you need semiconductor to process those data from the memory, the processors, the I/O to make it happen, right? If you're driving a car today, I jokingly call a car is nothing but a data center on wheels today. Nothing but a data center on 4 wheels, right? And how many of us were affected by the shortage of automotive chips, right? We couldn't buy a car in last few years without, because there was such a huge shortage of automotive things, right? And taking that into cognizance, a lot of the regions and countries are basically, like especially the United States, has taken a very bold step around bringing back chips manufacturing back to their specific regions. But United States is not the exception in any shape or form. We have seen Europe actually come from behind and launch their own version of EU Chips Act, which is a significant, close to 50 billion European dollars that they're investing in Europe to bring manufacturing back in Europe. The biggest one, actually, and surprising to folks maybe in this audience, might be South Korea. South Korea has been the electronics giant through Samsung, LG, SK Hynix, but they are probably putting the most amount of investment dollars on the semiconductor front. 5 years ago, taking cognizance about the importance of South Korea, we actually created a joint fund with KVIC, the Korea Venture Investment Corporation, which is part of the Korean government, to specifically focus around investments coming out of Korea and their importance in the semiconductor industry. I'm proud to say this is probably one of the best performing deep tech funds there. Out of 6 companies we have invested, 4 went IPO, 5th one is filing IPO as well. And in cognizance of that, we just launched our second fund as well. Similarly, Taiwan. You may not know, but Taiwan and TSMC account for majority of the high-end chips that are made in the world today. And as part of it, we also launched a joint fund with Taiwan to specifically focus around semiconductor innovations and semiconductor manufacturing and industrial 4.0 related activities with Taiwan. We actually partnered with ITRI, which is the organization through which TSMC, MediaTek, and others were spun off as well. China actually has taken a very active load in the semiconductor industry. If you see over the last few years, a lot of the electronics manufacturing has moved to China, right? And not just assembly and OSAT and packaging, but the high-end memory fabs and high-end logic fabs have also come up in China. A lot of it for domestic consumption, but also export to the world. So where is India in this? At TiEcon, you have heard about the India growth story, right? There's a lot of discussion around how easy it is to do payments in India, how the India domestic market is growing, the success of IPL, which is going on right now. There's a lot of things to cheer about India. The GDP is growing pretty fast. But one thing that we do lack is the semiconductor manufacturing, right? But that is changing. And I want you to roll your eyes because you have heard this story before, right? People have talked about if you've been in the semiconductor industry as long as I have been, the India semiconductor story comes and goes. But this time, you can actually see manufacturing on the ground. Starting with electronics manufacturing. There is a lot of shift of production from, for example, from Apple and other companies to actually move the manufacturing of iPhones, which is $1 billion phones a year, to India. You're seeing that on the ground happening as it is. There's a significant amount of domestic consumption that is driven, and there's a lot of focus around companies like Boat and others that are driving next generation goods. And also, we had invested in a portfolio company called Tezol that is bringing electronic products and doing manufacturing in India and other places. The government of India administration has put a lot of incentives, and we'll hopefully see some big announcements coming around OSATs, packaging, if not the entire semiconductor fab also coming up. There is significant amount of incentives for compound semiconductor devices. Compound semiconductor devices are things like silicon carbide, GaN, which go into fast charging, and also semiconductor design companies as well. We talked about batteries, but I want to draw your attention to how big. I saw only maybe 25% of you raise your hands around how many people have electric cars here. But as I said, worldwide or even in US, like less than 5% people have electric cars, and that's going to change. Obviously, we here in Silicon Valley, we complain that there are too many Teslas running around, but this is going to change. Not change by 10%, 20%. We are going to see a 10x increase in manufacturing in the United States. That is 10x. We are going to go from around 100 gigawatt hour to close to a billion gigawatt hour of capacity in the United States. We're already seeing battery manufacturing in Georgia, North Carolina, obviously Michigan and other regions. We obviously have seen the big Tesla plant in Nevada, but think of 10x. I know you don't want to see 10x more Teslas or 10x more electric cars on your way home, but it's going to happen. The time has come, the moment has come, and it is going to happen. We have been investing in this battery space for over 5-6 years. One of our portfolio companies, Solid Energy, which I was board of, they are putting up plants here in China, in US, China, Korea, largely driven by a company like GM and Hyundai, who are driving them and integrating in the next generation, and Honda as well. There's also the EV story is not just about battery manufacturing, it's also about power electronics. We are one of the investors in Enphase, which is now a $30-40 billion company, which is pioneering both microinverters as well as bidirectional charging, right? It is very annoying that during the winter season, which has gone on till May right now, right, a lot of us lost power, right? Which is incredible for a first world country to be losing power, right? But if you can put all this storage in-house, that's going to be a game changer. We don't need to be dependent on the world-class facilities that PG&E drives. That is, I'm sure we all have complaints of PG&E, but we need to get out of that mold as well. Similarly, in India, you don't see as much EVs or as much infrastructure, but that is changing, right? You see some Tata cars and here and there, but that is changing slowly but surely. We are going to see a 20x increase in capacity in India in the next 5 years, right? So India is going to be where US is going to be in the next 4 or 5 years, and my bet is actually it'll probably grow much faster, especially given that India has such a huge automotive manufacturing capabilities as well, and world-class automotive manufacturing capabilities as well. I'm not going to spend too much time here, but this is something that we are seeing very closely. The biopharma manufacturing, the whole drug industry is a fairly big market worldwide. India is leading, US is leading, but as we have seen during the pandemic, this is a national security issue. So you are going to see all of a significant increase in pharma manufacturing globally, like a 3x increase in manufacturing over the next few years as well. So long story short, there's a lot of manufacturing happening in electronics, there's a lot of manufacturing happening in batteries and the broader recycling, and there's a lot of manufacturing happening in biopharma. If this is so good, why are people not investing in manufacturing? Why is the world not running to invest in manufacturing? For a very simple reason, manufacturing is hard. Just sheer manufacturing is hard, right? I don't know how many of you have kids getting ready to college. Everybody wants to do computer science, right? Because it's sexy, or data analytics, it's sexy, right? But at the heart of it, the opportunity or the challenges in manufacturing is an opportunity for you, and we need to see more people in computer science and others actually use their skills to solve some of the high-value problems in manufacturing. Let me take one by one and talk about it, right? So one thing is about labor arbitrage, right? A lot of regions in Asia are much cheaper. Just the cost of labor is much cheaper. No argument about it, right? So if you need to bring manufacturing here, the productivity, like say the labor is 3x cheaper in other, like Vietnam and other regions. If you have to bring the same manufacturing here, the productivity of the employee has to be 3x better. How do you get 3x improvement in productivity, right? So fundamentally, if it is such a large industry, any improvements is going to have a non-linear improvement in the output as well, right? So we are making a lot of bets around the use of sensor and IoT data and use of AI and ML to actually improve productivity in factory floors. I'll give an example of a company called Makina Rocks. This is based in South Korea and US, but they are going after all of the fabs and battery and semiconductor industry and basically looking at how to get the data from these things so that we can predict failures in advance. So that way you can ship components, you can ship parts that are failing way in advance without having to airlift or send people to fight. There's a lot of discussion around data, right? People don't want to share data from factory floors. So the question is, how do you use secure encryption schemes like fully homomorphic encryption, where you're not sending decrypted data, but you're able to send and operate on encrypted data? We have invested in a company called Kornami, which is exactly doing that. On the biomanufacturing, there's, we and my friends at Mubadala, we have invested in a company called Resilience, right? They are trying to be the TSMC of biomanufacturing, right? Bringing the same capabilities that are the best practices that you have seen in semiconductor industry to the biopharma industry. The biopharma industry, believe it or not, is still in the 80s and 90s in terms of capabilities. I'll come to Q&A. Okay, give me 5 minutes, I'll get there. The second thing, right, is if you see this whole manufacturing, there's a huge need for local manufacturing, right? So the use of 3D printing largely has been now focused around prototyping, but we do see a significant adoption of 3D printing across the globe, right? Initially, it starts off as prototyping, but we do anticipate that it's going to move into more and more industries and not just aerospace and other industries as well. The third thing is around access to critical parts, right? A lot of these materials are already spoken for, or they're in regions that are problematic for us or for the world, right? And we need to pay attention to it. So the question is, how do you create high-performance materials that can be high performance and yet don't use, are not dependent on what I would call a rarer materials which are mined in some want-torn regions. So we're making bets around those things. And lastly, right, all of this manufacturing takes a huge amount of energy. Don't make no mistake about it, right? And so this is one of the things that we are actually very passionate about. So we, and along with some of my peers here, we have been focused around how do we drive reduction of energy in the semiconductor industry and other manufacturing sectors, right? And that is by using science-based innovations, right? Not just we'll do this, we'll do credits and other things, right? But very much focused on science-based innovations, right? I want to highlight one example, right? For example, a lot of the fabs, et cetera, use a huge amount of pumps to basically pump in materials and other stuff in and out, right? Pumps are everywhere, right? They're used from all the way from your fans to semiconductor fabs, right? So what if you could come up with a much more lightweight, high-efficiency power pumps that can change the energy consumption by a significant margin, right? So those are kind of the bets that we and Applied and some of our other peers are doing as well. So each of these opportunities or challenges that we talked about opportunity are investment opportunities, right? And these investment opportunities are because you can scale them at a global level. I do want to quickly transition and give a plug for Applied and Applied Ventures. We have been investing in this space since 2006. We are invest up to 100 million a year. If you see a typical fund lasts around 10 years, that's $1 billion fund. We have invested in 18 countries, Europe, Asia, India. We lead, we do both early stage and growth stage investment, but we are focused on specifically looking at issues in manufacturing globally that we can solve with using technology solutions as well. And believe it or not, it has been a very profitable market, right? In terms of exits, we have a significant amount of exits that have happened over the last few years in this space. We had like 3 IPOs around among the 25 active companies that we have in our portfolio today, and significant big M&As, right? Who says materials investing is not sexy? Like Inpria, which is developing the next generation materials, was sold for over 500 million, right? As well. But these are sectors that you don't necessarily see the traditional Silicon Valley entrepreneurs investing in this space, but we are making those investments as well. And obviously, Resilience is on its way to be a decacorn as well. The other half of the manufacturing is how do you get access to state-of-the-art labs and facilities? So as part of our engagement, we have opened up we have made $1 billion investment as part of the co-investment fund with the state of New York, right? So startups get access to these $1 billion facilities without having to spend the $1 billion, right? So we are doing everything in our might to reduce the friction and the overhead it takes to get manufacturing on and new materials development at scale, right? So these are labs and facilities that you don't, no amount of money can buy access to these kind of labs and facilities, and we are bringing this to the open. I'll give you an example of a company. We invested in this low-power memory company called Adesto. In this case, we actually worked with the company to develop that next-generation memory, right? This company was very successful. We brought in other syndicate partners, and we accelerated their high-volume manufacturing. The company ultimately went IPO and ultimately sold to Dialog for $500 million. But this was a 6-7 year journey to actually get this company from Series A to an exit, right? But that's the kind of level of engagement that's required. It's hard, but it's doable, and the price is worth it in the broader scheme of things. So I do want to leave some time for Q&A, but if you're an entrepreneur working in the manufacturing sector, please join us for an Applied Ventures Portfolio Day. We're going to talk about manufacturing in 3 segments that we talked about. One is electronics and semiconductors. Second is the ESG and the battery segment, and also enabling material inflections in new areas, including pharma and other areas. You can use the QR code. Who says manufacturing folks are not keeping up with the 21st century, right? So I open up to Q&A as well. Thank you so much. A big hand to the TiEcon and TiEcon organizers.